Revolutionary War Part 7, you need to have taken up directly from the last one, and just as if we just have to continue right on. Who was who? You know, there were areas in the new United States where it was almost dangerous to let anybody know you're a patriot, and other areas where it was dangerous for everybody to think you're a Tory. And by the way, the Tories are outraged that these rebels should call themselves patriots because they saw themselves as the patriots. They were loyal to king and country like they'd always been. They're the patriots. These rebels are just rebels. Now, John Adams, early in the war, based on pretty much nothing, estimated that no more than a third of the American population actively supported independence, and that another third actively opposed it, and the middle third just apathetic. Just don't bother me. Those folks are always with us. We owe them nothing. Modern historians have updated this a bit. For one thing, it's hard to pin down because as the tides of battle shift back and forth, so does public opinion. Okay, there are times when people supporting independence is almost down to nothing and then back and forth. But it now looks like about around 40% on average, probably a rolling average, on around 40% actively support independence, around 20 to 25% actively oppose it, and that still leaves you your apathetic middle third who just don't think it has anything to do with them. Like I say, those folks are always around. Okay, so we have deeply divided public opinion. We have people taking up arms against each other. We have friendships being destroyed. We have families being separated. Benjamin Franklin had an illegitimate son to whom he was very close. His name was William, I believe. And 1751, Benjamin Franklin proved that lightning is electricity. Way to go, dude. Flying a kite with a key tied to the string. I don't know how that proved it, but it did. And his son, William, was at his elbow when he did that. Benjamin Franklin lived in London for about 10 years through the run-up to the Revolution. And he might have just stayed over there. But he was, I don't have time to tell you this, Parliament, he was an agent, actually a paid agent for several different colonies, colonial agent. And he was fairly accustomed to be called in to testify or to, answer questions. But this parliamentary committee called him in, and they're very frustrated and they're very angry about what was happening in America, and they turned him into the lightning rod. They just dumped all their anger and bitterness on him personally. He was stunned. He's on the next ship for America. And joined the Patriot cause with gusto. We might not have otherwise after that humiliation. But his son William, by that time, was the royal governor of New Jersey. And William Franklin never wavered. He was a firm Tory throughout. And then after the war, he attempted to restore contact with his father. And remember, the father and son aren't usually as close as these two men were. Benjamin Franklin wasn't interested. He never managed to regain contact. That happened over and over and over again. And sometimes the husband is a Tory and the wife's either tuned out or the other. This was nasty. This was a very difficult time on an individual and personal level. Okay. So we're fighting for principles that preclude our doing what we have to do and setting up a central government. We just somehow managed to get away with that. We're using pieces of paper as money and running up enormous debts. And that is the rest of the story, all right? When we get to the next unit, we'll see that Alexander Hamilton's brilliant financial plan that he got Congress to set up in the early 1790s, all of these old worthless continentals that people could find or scrape off the wall or whatever, they could turn them in for new bonds. They'd been repaid at full face value plus interest. Rest of the story. And we're fighting each other. This thing's a civil war. American advantages, obviously, we had a few. I used to have a list of about 6. I got it down to about 3. And there's not any one big slam dunk advantage, except maybe one that we'll get to. One thing is we have uh, we have exceptional leadership. Okay, in one generation, by which I mean the people alive at any one time, we're able to come up with this all-star cast of exceptional leaders like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, etc. The list is pretty impressive. And these men, as I said, in the process of becoming educated, they had imbibed with their mother's milk the public principles of the old Roman Republic and figured large. Uh, we have 100 times as many people today as we did then. Could we come up with a proportionate number of leaders of that quality? Somehow I doubt it. Their culture promoted excellence. Ours seems to value mediocrity. It does. Think about it. Our culture worships mediocrity, and we get what we deserve, except when we get better than we deserve, which occasionally happens. We have a moral advantage. And when uh, when we're all over the map in terms of whether we support the war or not, and when sometimes men who are out there fighting in the war, their families are begging them to come home, and their friends are making fun of them, and they're still out there. Uh, that takes some explaining. It does. So we owe an enormous amount to the men who signed up for the duration of the war and saw the thing through and got it done. When they had no illusions, they knew they had not been properly trained until later on in the war. They knew that their officers might not know diddly squat about what they're doing. They know they're being asked to go fight some of the world's finest professional soldiers at a disadvantage. They knew that they probably weren't going to be paid and might not even be fed, and they're still out there. That should send chills down your spine. It really should. We have a moral advantage. British soldiers, they're just pros. They just go where they're sent and do what they're told. They don't really have a dog in the hunt like we do. Thirdly, we have a strategic advantage, and this is if there's a slam dunk, this is it. Wars are not like football games. In a football game, both teams have essentially the same objective, that being to outscore the opponent. And when the clock runs out, bang, it's over, and you look at the scoreboard and see who won. Wars are not like that. It's not unusual for the two sides in a war to define victory in very different ways, and that's the case here. So look at it from the British side. And however they define victory, we keep that from happening long enough, we win. Okay, for Britain, victory was nothing less than a complete reconquest of the former colonies, they would have thought of as colonies, and the suppression of all active resistance. Until all active resistance has been extinguished, they have not won the war. Right? So, that means we do not have to defeat Britain to win the war. We do not have to crush their army in America, build a mighty fleet, sail across the Atlantic, invade England, capture London, and hang the king to win the war. All we have to do is keep them from winning it. So, fortunately, General Washington figured that out in a timely manner. Early in the war, he was daydreaming about some big battle that would settle the score. That wouldn't have worked out well. But what we have to do is drag this out. Keep it going year after year. As long as Washington's hungry, barefoot, ragged little army is out there, Britain has not won the war, even if we don't win very many battles. So, if we can hang on long enough, every year that goes by, from the British perspective, and remember, this one comes down to political support. They're not used to that in Britain for the war. It gets more complex. Victory looks ever farther away and not capable of being accomplished. And it gets more expensive. Other enemies pile on. So if we can hang on long enough, British leaders, new British leaders may arise that will just cut us a deal. Let us go. And that's how we did it, boys and girls. Okay, to claim that we won the war with some French assistance is kind of like saying Daddy and I killed the bear, if you follow me. In order to get there, there's several things we really, really need. We need foreign aid. We can't even make gunpowder. So we got to have that. We got to have weapons. We got to have various things we can't provide for ourselves. And over a year before we declared independence, we opened relations with France and Spain. Spain doesn't like us. France, they're going to overlook some things just to get back at the Brits. They started funneling supplies to us through an obscure little island down in the Caribbean called St. Eustatius. It belonged to the Dutch. And French ships would sail up and unload these cargoes. And people are, did I order that? Did you order that? I didn't order that. And then American ships would come pick it up and sail away. Everybody knows what's going on. The French had done a very modern thing. They created a totally phony, fictitious corporation that was doing all this, claiming it wasn't the government. So the British demanded that the Dutch government put a stop to it, because it's their island. And the Dutch government, they had a republic. But they were so afraid of their government making a bad decision, they contrived it where they pretty much couldn't make any decision at all. So this was delayed until finally the Brits declared war on the Netherlands. So we need foreign aid. Diplomatic recognition. You can declare independence till you're blue in the face, but until a real recognized country recognizes you, it doesn't count. We had to wait 20 months declaring independence in July 1776. It wasn't until February 1778 that France gave us diplomatic recognition, and that puts us on the map. Now, the British didn't recognize it, but that meant that under international law, other countries could openly aid us and claim that did not constitute an act of war against Britain. If we're just a rebellion, then it would. And if we could pick up an ally, just one ally, and that's going to put us over the top. It did. Again, February 1778, France, having recognized us, signed a treaty where they became our permanent, the word was perpetual, forever, world without end, amen, ally of the United States. They even sent an army over here that played a key role in effecting the British surrender at Yorktown. So that would do it. Now, I usually close this out this way, and the time element looks good. I think Britain lost the war the day it started. That doesn't mean they could not have won a military victory. That doesn't mean they couldn't have extinguished resistance, but they've still lost the one thing that they could never afford to lose. And that was the automatic loyalty of the colonists, which they had always been able to take for granted. The fact that shots are being fired, the fact that a war has broken out, means that Britain has fumbled that irreplaceable thing away. And even if they won the war on one level, what have they won? Are we going to go back to being like we were in 1760 or something? No. What they won is not a loyal population. What they now have is going to be a sullen, resentful, rebellious population that will rise again at the next opportunity, and the next one after that, and the next one after that. And the Brits knew about that. They'd been going through that with Ireland since the 12th century. We would have been Ireland times about 100. We would have been a permanent drain on Britain's resources for all time to come until we finally won our independence. So the fact was, once they kind of got over it, they had all the benefits of trade with America without the expense. The way it worked out was best for everybody. So that's going to be the Revolutionary War, and I'll see you later.